Hi, Dr. Joe. My name is Matthew Johnson. I'm a student in your Marine Science 210 course in the fall of 2025, and I want to tell you about my perspective on chasing coral. The documentary started with the thoughts of Richard Vevers. At first, he talks about the ocean, and then they mention one of his achievements, which was mapping a good bit of the ocean floor. They then explain why this is important, and the reason that it is because people can now explore these parts of the ocean floor on the internet and do all of this without actually having to travel the world and go to these dive sites themselves. It brings this experience to everyone who can access the internet essentially. The documentary then goes on to describe how Vevers got into doing all of that. He had an early start with diving in his life. He started diving at the age of 16. As he dove more and more, he realized that his most favorite creature to observe was slowly disappearing from the dive sites he frequented. When he saw this happening, he had the thought that this could be happening in more places than just the sites he frequented, and also with more species as well. After this, a key point was brought up. It was that people don't fully realize that things like this are happening because what happens in the ocean is out of our sight and therefore outside of a lot of people's minds as well. What makes all of this so important is that the next key idea that was mentioned. This idea is that the ocean is the source of life and that it controls everything. With Evers having all this on his mind and even more, he started his ocean floor mapping project, which was called the XL Catlin Sea View Survey, and its goal was to reveal the oceans to the world. However, when the images of the oceans were made available to people, they weren't understanding that there is a problem in the ocean. Because of all this, Vevers and his team realized that they had to go back to the drawing board and realize that they were only at the start of their journey. It was after all of this that they became enlightened to the facts in the past 30 years, the world had lost 50% of its coral, and that 89% of corals have been lost in Florida alone. When they learned this, they looked for images from when these coral reefs were flourishing and then compared them to images taken in the present day, which where these coral reefs were either completely or extremely diminished. After learning this in the documentary, it was mentioned that scientists have gotten depressed about this coral issue. In response to this, they had Vevers share his belief that the issue can be solved with effort and creative thinking. After this, corals took on the spotlight and they were described in great detail, which included what they are, what they're made of, the structure of them, what they're similar to, what they eat, what they provide, and other details that provide insight to their role in the ecosystem. After coral was discussed in this extreme and in depth detail, the documentary started to follow Vevers' efforts once again. This time, he and his team were investigating the Samoa Airport Reef after they had already visited it. This is because they had heard a disturbing rumor about the reef's coral turning white. When they visited it, this turned out to be true. Upon finding this, Vevers said that this encounter was a turning point for him. After following Vevers' journey, the documentary went on to describe why exactly the coral was turning white. They said that it wasn't because of some disease that they were getting, and that it was because the temperature of the water was increasing. It was then that the realization occurred that climate change and global warming don't just impact the atmosphere, but the ocean as well. After all of this, we began to follow Vevers again, and now he starts working with who the people behind Chasing Ice because they were trying to bring awareness to the same issue that was impacting all these different environments in the world. This issue being global warming and the effects of climate change. Both teams had the belief that if they could properly document the changes happening, then they could reveal it to the public in a powerful and impactful way. Their first challenge was designing a camera that would capture this change in the reefs over a time frame of a couple of months. They decided to deploy these cameras based on the data trends on global scales of mass bleaching, where corals all over the world experience bleaching at about the same time. The first one happened from 1997 to 1998, the second in 2012, and a third potential one that at the time, which was expected to happen in 2017. If they wanted to capture this global scale bleaching event, they had to move fast so that they could catch this event and communicate it in the impactful way that they intended to. During their setup for the cameras to capture this bleaching event, they had issues because of how intricate the cameras were and because of some unfavorable environmental conditions at the time. At one of the sites, the equipment became waterlogged and got messed up because of that. At this point in the documentary, it takes a brief break from the present to talk about a man named Charlie Varon, who was the first person to properly document corals. It was during this that another key idea was mentioned. This idea was that the more complexity there was in a coral reef, the greater the opportunity for biodiversity. It was then explained that corals create a neighborhood for many different species of aquatic creatures. Coral reefs support 25% of all marine life on the planet, as well as 500 million to 1 billion people. It was also said that many medicines used today come from corals, and that they act as barriers during tropical storms and cyclones to help protect the land. After this, we began to follow the efforts of Evers again and the Chasing Ice team, where we learned that all the cameras didn't manage to capture any of the bleaching of the coral reefs that they were left at because the lenses were out of focus. Because of this, all the footage that they did have was useless. With this setback, they managed to find a solution by switching the lenses they used on those cameras to a fixed lens, and then they began quickly planning to capture more reefs that were expected to go through a bleaching soon. The location they chose to go to was the Great Barrier Reef, where setting up the cameras went smoothly. After this, a statistic was mentioned, which was that 93% of the heat trapped in the atmosphere goes into the ocean, and that this happens because of carbon emissions globally. It then cut back to the team's current efforts where they encountered the worst possible situation. The situation was a strong cyclone recorded in the southern hemisphere named Winston. This prevented them from clearly capturing the bleached corals because this cyclone brought cold water to the Great Barrier Reef, which prevented the whole bleaching process from happening. To get past this part of the issue, they quickly relocated to another area that was unaffected by the cyclone along the Great Barrier Reef, where they resorted to capturing these changes manually because they didn't have enough time to bring the cameras with them. During their time there, they had to capture as much as they could every day, going to 60 different locations daily. They spent about 4 hours of their day underwater capturing changes at these sites over the course of a month. It was during this that they had also received word that the reef at New Caledonia was behaving weirdly. The reef was glowing, and not even the people who knew the most about corals at the time knew what was happening. It was then that they found out that this was due to the coral producing a chemical sunscreen for itself to protect itself from the heat. The colors of the corals they observed were described as the most vivid colors that they had ever seen. After this, it cut back to the crew that was manually capturing the Lizard Island Reef for a month, and the crew was going through a lot. They said that they were watching something new die every day and that it was hard to watch. They said that towards the end of their time there, the reef was dead for as far as they could see. After this, it cuts away and it is explained that we are witnessing the beginning of an ecological collapse that won't just affect a quarter of the ocean, but many animals and people on land as well. Entire classes of organisms could go extinct. It was then said that if there was a debate, it wouldn't be about whether or not this will happen, but about whether or not it's going to be bad or really bad. They then explained that the average of the projections of how much the ocean will heat up would cause the entirety of the coral reefs to disappear in about 25 years. At the rate that they were going, coral will bleach more and more every year and won't be healthy enough to recover from it. After this, Zach who was a member of Vevers's and the Chasing Ice's efforts, held an interview with Charlie Varon. In this interview, Varon explained that his most cherished thing in the world is the Great Barrier Reef, and now it is degrading and dying. This makes him very upset, and he then speaks about how important it is to continue influencing people to care for the ocean and its reefs. After their journey to capture the change in coral reefs, the members who were involved with making it possible started giving speeches and presentations on their findings to bring further awareness to the issue. After this, there are some more statistics that are revealed that are 29% of the Great Barrier Reef died in 2016, and that 25 to 50% of coral had been long since dead. After this, the documentary ends with proof that people in countries around the world begun to acknowledge this issue and have started taking actions to save coral reefs, with Vevers's idea that the people of the world have everything they need to fix the issue, and that all that is needed is to get the ball rolling. The first of four things that was mentioned in the documentary that was also mentioned in class was the negative impacts of excessive carbon emissions, which is the root cause for all the issues mentioned in the documentary. The second is life in the ocean, and this was mentioned and alluded to throughout the documentary when they talked about the role corals play and how they promote biodiversity in the sea. The third thing that was mentioned is the idea of living shorelines, when they explained that coral reefs act as barriers to prevent damage during weather events like cyclones. The fourth and last thing mentioned is all of these details about corals. There's all these details mentioned about corals. I give the documentary a thumbs up because it covered the journey that Vevers went on really well and also explained everything very well too. Additionally, they gave the documentary a lot of emotion, and this helped to keep it engaging. This documentary is something I would definitely recommend to somebody else.